So we are finishing up a 5-week sermon series titled Family. And this morning, it was supposed to be, even if you look at your outline, it was supposed to be Stacy and I sharing the message this morning as we talk about parenting and influencing the next generation. But unfortunately, Stacy had kind of some minor surgery on her lip to remove squamous cells that went pretty deep on Friday. And so the doctor said, don't talk. So she can cry, but she's not allowed to talk. Unfortunately, you're stuck with me for all the sermon instead of only 3/5 of it this morning. But I want to, so we're going to talk about family today and parenting, but also about the next generation. So I want to start by introducing you to our family, and we tell stories about them a lot, but this is my family. So from left to right, that's Riley. He's our second oldest. And then Ben is our youngest. He's in college. JT is next to him. He is our son-in-law. And then our favorite child is Emily in the middle. I mean, they all know it. It's all good. And then I'm next to Emily, and then Stacy, and then our youngest Will is on the right. And then Goose is Will's dog, and Bailey is our dog. And when I left this morning, she was alive. When I get home, I don't know. So, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about our family and share some stories and so forth. But you may be wondering, like, well, how are your kids doing? Do they, what do they think about this whole thing? And so I want to sort of give you my, trying to think what the word is. This is like the tip from my kids that say that Stacy and Matt were good parents, I guess you'd say it. So this is our award. So my son Will gave this to me on Father's Day a couple of years ago, this picture. So it's a little plaque that he said, "Dear Dad, well done, I'm awesome." So he gave that to me for Father's Day. I want to read to you from Psalm 71 to start out with. This is Psalm 71. And it says this. It says, "So even to old age and gray hairs, O God, do not forsake me until I proclaim your might to another generation, your power to all those to come." There's another version that I've memorized that says, "Even when I am old and gray, let me proclaim your word to the next generation." And what we want to talk about this morning is, what does that look like? What does it look like to proclaim God's word to the next generation? Specifically to our kids, but also broader, just in many different ways that we influence the next generation. And as I talk about parenting this morning, and I apologize, I'm a little snotty, so when I do this, what do you do the mute, okay? Ready? We're going to practice once. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Good teamwork. Yes. Let's give Sweaty a hand. That was almost as good. I just need to say, like, the strings up here in Holy Forever, was that not amazing? I'm like, golly, I'm like a half an inch from heaven this morning. That was unbelievable. I feel like my cold is like a half inch from hell, but that's a different story. Stick to the script. When it comes to parenting, there's some things that I know, a few things. There's a lot that I don't know. But there's one thing that I know for sure when it comes to parenting, is that parenting is tough. Parenting is difficult at every single age. When your kids are little, when they're infants, it is difficult to even get a full night's sleep. When your kids are toddlers and running around, it is just plain exhausting, running after them, picking up, changing diapers, nap times. It is just exhausting. When you get to have kids who are elementary age, that's a really hard time because they're starting to make these decisions and you're trying to figure out what rules do we have, what rules don't we have, and you're trying to figure that out. And you can kind of make your kids do the right things, but you want the attitude behind it and doing things for the right reasons. And that can be super challenging. And then when your kids get into middle school and high school, it's just, there's something, the parenting changes from physically exhausting to emotionally exhausting, because you look at the decisions that they're making and you think, gosh, the decisions they're making, they make the wrong decision and like things could go wrong. when they're talking about sex and alcohol and who they get in a car with. And it can be frightening and just emotionally exhausting. And even, I know there's many of you like us who are empty nesters. And when your kids are grown and gone, there's another difficulty to that because you can see sometimes them making poor decisions and you can't really influence, or you think that you can't, and you're wondering just how do we parent when our kids are grown and gone, and what does that look like? And so this morning we're going to talk about parenting. But I also want to say, I know that there's a lot of you who are not parents. You're going to be parents eventually, or you're not parents, or whatever it is. But I want to really say that this message, yes, we're talking about parenting, but so much of what we're talking about is about influencing the next generation. So if you are a teacher, this message is for you. If you are an aunt or an uncle, this message is for you. If you're a coach of whether it's little kids or bigger kids or college or high school, this message has application for you. And if you're a small group leader around River Ridge Church, and there's a lot of you, this message is for you because you have the opportunity to influence the next generation. And my hope is that individuals and as a church, we will do what this says in the book of Psalms. Even when I'm old and gray, I always want to be proclaiming the gospel, the truth of God to the next generation. One of the things that I've said over the course of this series is that a lot in this series deals with when culture and biblical values or biblical truth collide. And we talked about it with singleness, we talked about it with marriage for a couple weeks, and this week is true as well. As we talk about parenting, we're going to find that the truth of what God says clashes with what the culture around us says. And we're going to have to, in some ways, step back and recognize that the culture is pulling us, sometimes even unknowingly, in a certain direction, and to put the brakes on and say, no, I want to parent God's way, not the way of the culture. And so Stacy and I have been parenting for 28 years, and we really what we've kind of boiled down our parenting to. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of goals and rules and adages and all those kinds of things that we could talk about. But really for us, we've focused on really 5 goals or 5 biblical truths that kind of lead to goals. And so that's what I'm going to share with you this morning is these 5 goals. And so here's the first one. It's imagine the end. Imagine the end. The book of Deuteronomy gives us a very good picture of what the end looks like. So this says, this is Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength." And that may sound familiar because Jesus repeats it in the New Testament. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's the end that we're shooting for. That the end, imagine the end, is what I ultimately want for my kids. The most important thing that I want for them, really the only thing that I want from them, everything else falls under it, is I want my kids to live this. I want them to love God with everything that is in them. And that out of that flows a love for people. And so we kind of got to figure out, well, how do we get to that end? I know what the end is, but how do we get there? I think there's a couple of questions that are very helpful to help us to get to that point in time. And the first is asking this question: what matters in 100 years? What's going to matter 100 years from now as we look at our schedules and our things and things we say to our kids, the things that we do and don't do? What's going to really have an impact, or what's going to make a difference 100 years from now? Or to put it slightly differently is, what does this matter in light of eternity? And think through that question. So we talked about that the end is that we want our kids to love God and love others. I think it's helpful to look again at the culture and say, well, what are some of the other ends? What are some of the wrong ends? Where is culture trying to take kids? And I think one of those is what I would call the wrong end. So there's an end that we look at the culture and I think it maybe varies kind of pocket by pocket or place by place, but I think that there's some things that are the wrong end. I think one of the things that's the wrong end is we want our kids to have all of these experiences. Like we want them to travel internationally and to have this experience and that experience. We want them to be in tennis or in soccer or baseball or dance, or we want them to learn to play an instrument or all those things. And none of those are bad, and our kids did those things. But what can happen is we end up having that as the goal, that kind of replaces what the actual end for our kids will be or should be, is to love God with everything that's in them. And you can see this really kind of transforming our culture, and really I think over the last probably 40 years or so. I mean, if you look around, like when I was growing up, Sundays were pretty sanctified. Sundays were pretty set apart, that they didn't schedule things on Sundays when it came to sports and activities and all that kind of stuff. And now Sunday is just like another Saturday to schedule things on. And you can see the culture moving that way. I think another end that we can move towards, and again, I think this is accidentally, I think we just kind of go with the culture instead of saying, what does God want? Is that we want our kids to love God among other things. Like we say, what do you want for your kid? Well, I want them to love God. I want them to love people. I want them to have a sport that they're passionate about. I want them to have an artistic thing that they're passionate about. I want them to get good grades. I want them, and we kind of have this plethora of things that we say, I want Jesus among other things for my child. And again, those other things aren't wrong, but the problem is that when we set them anywhere close to equal to what God says, this is the end of where your child is to go. And that's this whole passage in Deuteronomy is about that. We're going to go on and read a little bit more of it, but it's really intended to say this is where parents are to take their kids, that they would love God with everything that is in them. There's an adage that I love that applies here, and the adage is kind of a modern proverb, I guess you'd say. It's this: it's direction, not intention, determines destination. Direction, not intention, determines destination. In other words, we can have an end in mind. I want my kids to love God and love people, and we can have great intentions towards that, but unless we are taking actual steps and decisions to get them from here to there, they're just good intentions. It's the direction that we're heading, not the intentions that will put them at the destination. And so what that means for us, as we parent, we want to prioritize our schedules around the priority that we've set for our kids of what the end that we have in mind for them and what God's end in mind for them is. Let's go back to Deuteronomy chapter 6. And verse 6, it says this. It says, "These commandments that I give you today are to be upon your hearts." These commandments are to be upon your hearts. Before we can teach these words, these commandments to our children, we internalize them ourselves. And so the second goal is make it personal. Make it personal. The best way that you as a parent, the best way that you as an influencer can help your kids is to be growing personally spiritually. It's to have your own growing relationship with Jesus. It's interesting, you look at this verse and it says, and I'm going to read it again, it says, "The commandments that I give you today are to be upon your hearts." It doesn't say, and these commandments are to be upon your lips, or these commandments are to come from your mouth. In other words, he's saying, put them on your heart first, and then your life will flow from that. And I want you to think for a second about your parents, okay, your mom and dad, maybe even your grandparents if you were raised by them. But I want you to think about that. And I want you to think about, when you think about them, what are the ways that you want to be like them, And what are the ways that you don't want to be like them, right? So I look at my mom and my dad, and there's a lot of ways that I want to be like them, but there's some ways I'm like, I don't really want to be like my mom or my dad in this situation, right? So I want you to think about that. How do you want to be like your mom? How do you want to be like your dad? Now, with that thought in mind, I'm going to guess that the reason that you want that characteristic or don't want a characteristic is because of the behavior or what you saw in their life. It's probably not because of the parenting words that came out of their mouth. It's probably not because of the words that they said. It's because of what you saw in their lives. You say, that's who he was. I want to be like that. That's what she did. I don't want to be like that. And so our goal is to make it personal. Our kids are all now grown and gone. And so it's fun to have conversations with them about life and asking them about parenting and what did you think about us as parents. And just adult to adult conversations are super fun with your kids if you can keep them alive that long. But it's interesting. We've asked our kids on time to time about, what did you see in us as parents? And probably the thing that they come back to the most is all of them would say or have said on occasion, when we came downstairs to get ready to go to school, Mom was there sitting on the couch, reading her Bible, writing stuff down. Or Dad was on the other couch and you guys were there together or separately and you were having a quiet time. You were meeting with God. They point to that. And the other thing they point to is just consistency. And they point to the fact that Stacy and I, we're the same whether we're at church or at home or at a small group or coaching a basketball game or watching a basketball game or a soccer game. But there's a consistency that they saw from place to place. And I think that's important for us to recognize of just kids see that in us. Now, what if you're not there yet? What if you're just new to following Christ? What if you have a whole lot of stuff in your life that you're trying to figure out and work out and your life doesn't look all nice and pretty, but yet you're still parenting? It's not like you can put your kids in a box, get your life straightened out, and then take them out and start parenting them. Here's the thing, is I really believe that when our kids look at us, it's not so much where we are, but it's the trajectory of our lives. That if you are young and just trying to figure out how to follow Christ and how to do some things and just become more of who God wants you to be, and you're working towards that, your kids will see that. One of the things that we talk about here at River Ridge a lot is taking your next steps in your journey of faith. And if you're taking your next steps, your kids will see that. But you're not going to get it right all the time. You're going to screw up. You're going to yell at your kids from time to time. It's not going to go right. But I tell you, one of the things that will help you in that and through that is to be good at apologizing to your kids. And I can remember a very specific instance where I kind of let Riley have it. And he deserved it. Like whatever I was yelling at him for, I don't remember what that was, but I let him have it. And he went into his room and was head in the pillow kind of thing. And I realized I had gone way overboard with him. And I went upstairs and I sat with him on the bed and I'm like, Riley, I am so sorry. I flew off the handle and I should not have done that. We're going to screw up as parents, but I think as much as teaching our kids all these different things of modeling what it means to own up to our junk, to own up to our stuff when we screw up is well worth it as we parent along these roads. The third goal for parenting, we're going to leave Deuteronomy and head over to Ephesians chapter 6. Ephesians chapter 6. And it says this, fathers, and we could say fathers or mothers, fathers or influencers, aunts and uncles, but fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. One of the most exasperating things that I think that we can do to our children to exasperate them, and I think this is what Paul is speaking to, is we make rule after rule after rule that we make our kids follow. right? Or equally so is we inconsistently apply the rules, where we say, hey, here's the rules, and sometimes they have to follow them, and sometimes they don't. And what's missing in that is the relationship, the priority of the relationship. We fostered a number of kids over the last 5 years, and in the fall of 2020, we fostered a little boy named Tristan, and then in the spring of 21, so just a few months later, we fostered another boy named Tristan. And so we have affectionately come to call him Tristan number 1 and Tristan number 2. And so when Tristan 1 came into our house, we were always telling him what not to do. And I wrote down some of these things. Don't jump on the couch. Clear your plate after dinner. Don't start eating until we've prayed. You can't watch that on TV. You can't watch that either on TV. Don't leave your bike in the rain. Don't yell at Stacy. Don't yell at Will. Don't yell at Ben. Don't yell at me. I mean, he had this thing where he would yell at Stacy, and he'd go, and he was from Southern Western. He'd go, Stacy, I promise you this. And then he would, it was the funniest thing. And like, after a while, you just couldn't take him seriously. I promise you this. But we had so many rules. Like, one day he gets off of his bed in his bedroom, and he hangs on like the door frame up there, and he hangs on the door frame, and it breaks, and he falls to the ground, right? Okay, one more rule, don't hang on door frames. We add that to the list of 55 rules that we had for him. We realized that we were exasperating this poor child. He wasn't raised in our home. He comes to us at age 8 years old, and he's just exasperated because he can't remember, much less follow, the 55, 60 rules that we've put in place for him. And so when he left our family and we got Tristan number 2, we said, we need to simplify this. And so it said, there's only 3 rules in our house. The 3 rules are treat others the way you want to be treated, make the wise choice, and no lying. And really no lying fits under 1 and 2, but we wanted to kind of separate that out. And it made it so much easier. And it was really interesting. Tristan was living in our house. Those were the rules. He seemed to like it. And you can, and really, like, just between us, don't tell your kids out there, but like, you can fit pretty much everything under those top 2 rules, right? But it helps to, for a framework. And so, but we got a kid named Michael about 2 weeks after Tristan came to us. And so Tristan was like, hey, Michael, welcome. There's only 3 rules here. And he starts telling the rules. So the point is this. We need rules, but what it's really about is this. The goal is fight for the heart. Fight for the heart. That we want to fight for the heart of our kids in whatever that takes. Because when our kids are little, we can control them. Like if a little toddler's here and I don't want him playing next to the electrical socket, I can pick him up and I can put him in his crib. I can control that. When kids are toddlers or when they're in elementary school, I can control stuff. I can, turn off the switch when they've played too much. I can turn off the TV. When the kids are older, I can take away the car keys. I can ground them. I can keep them from certain people, right? I can control them at that age. But eventually, you will lose the ability to control your kids. Whether it's 12 or 15 or 18, you will lose the ability to control your kids. And so our goal is to fight for the heart. Because when we have their hearts, then we are influencers. Then you never lose the ability to influence your child when you have their hearts. And for those of you who are not parents, this is where it's at. If you have somebody's heart that you want to influence, that's an amazing place to be. Here's the 4th goal that we have, is widen the circle. Widen the circle. And what this means is surrounding your kids with others who are saying and speaking the same message that you are. Surrounding your kids with other people who are speaking and saying the same message that you are. I want to read to you Proverbs chapter 13, verse 20. Proverbs chapter 13, verse 20. It says this. If we could put that up, it's not on my, thanks. It says, whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools suffers harm. And this is the idea of if we can get our kids to walk with others who are wise, then they're not going to fall to the direction of those who are fools, those who go in the wrong direction. My wife, Stacy, is an elementary teacher, and she works a lot with kind of 2nd through 5th graders, but sees everything that goes on in her elementary school. And she comments so frequently about the fools in her school. Like, the kids just make bad decisions, and she sees that, at school, making bad decisions, that there is a way that kids behave that is just foolish. And we want our kids to be in a place where they are surrounded by people who are making good decisions, people who are making the wise choice. Which is why at River Ridge Church, we emphasize small groups from the littlest to the biggest. When your kids enter into preschool, even we call those preschool small group leaders. When your kids are in elementary here, they sit in a circle with their peers and a leader, and they talk about the Bible, and they talk about life, and they talk about the intersection of it. Middle school kids sit in a circle and talk about life. It's about growing wise with the wise. There's always a leader there who has that influence on them. Man, poor Riley, I just realized he's like the butt of two problems here. I love you, Riley, if you watch this. But when Riley was in high school, he went through a pretty dark period where he was running from God and just making some really bad decisions. And we had his heart, but in some ways had lost his heart because we were his parents and he didn't want to listen to us. I think a lot of high school kids don't think their parents know anything, right? And it was sort of that phase, and he wanted to kind of do his own thing. But he had a friend named J.B. Ward, and J.B. was his young life leader. And J.B. was able to walk through this time, this really dark time, with Riley when he was going through this. And we're so thankful that before Riley hit these problems and these issues, that J.B. was already in his life, that we had intentionally kind of worked that friendship, because we knew that there's points in time when our kids wouldn't listen to us, but he had another adult in his life who was speaking that same kind of wisdom. My wife, Stacy, works with middle school kids here at River Ridge and also with wildlife kids at JA. And she was at a function last week. It was kind of a dessert dinner, kind of meet and greet sort of thing. And one of the moms came up to Stacy and said, I'm just so thankful because we are saying the same things at home that you're saying, but our daughter listens to you when she's kind of tuned us out. And we can all remember when we were teenagers and there was a period of time that we tuned our parents out. That's why we widened the circle. And if I could give you an encouragement, if you've got kids who are 4th, 5th, 6th grade, now is the time to widen the circle and put them in those groups, not when they get to be 15, 16 and they're already making bad decisions. And I say that kind of from experience. When I was lived in Cleveland, I was a youth director at a church. And there were times, a number of times, where a parent would come to me and say, hey, my son is really just rebelling. Can you go talk to him? And I'm like, I'll do the best I can, but your kid doesn't come around. Like, you haven't had him at youth group stuff really at all, and I don't have much of a relationship. I'll do my best. But if we can get our kids in these circles when they're younger, when we can say, hey, this is what you're going to do on a Sunday afternoon, or this is what you're going to do on a Sunday evening, that's when that relationship grows in widening the circle. Here's the last one. It comes from, the last goal comes from Deuteronomy 6. It says this, 6, 7. It says, you shall teach them, so this is teach the commandments of God, teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit at your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. And it's interesting as the writer of Deuteronomy, Moses, as he talks about these things, you can see about kind of the rhythm of life. When you sit at your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you get up, there's a rhythm to how life works. And so the 5th goal is create a rhythm. Create a rhythm. We want to create spiritual rhythms for our children. And I put these in 2 slightly different categories that certainly overlap. But one rhythm is the rhythm of the family. And that's a part of basically going to church, making church a priority. The end goal, by the way, is not, I hope my kids end up in church someday, right? That is a byproduct of your kids loving Jesus and loving other people well. But when our kids are in our home, we want to take them to church. One of the things that I heard from somebody and we have lived out is make a decision to take your kids to go to church. Make that decision one time and never deviate from it. Because I think far too often, it's just life gets busy, and I think far too often families wake up and ask the question, are we going to church today? What service are we going to? Do we want to go? Let's go to breakfast. I'm kind of tired. It's been a hard week. Make the decision, we're going to church. Unless somebody's sick, unless we're out of town, then we're going to church. That's the family rhythm. And then the other is rhythm as in terms of their own time with the Lord. We want our kids to own their own relationship with God. And so what we as parents do is we guide them towards that end. And we have something here at River Ridge, which we've had for a while, and we're going to begin to elevate this more and more. But we have kids' devotionals that are available for the kids at River Ridge Church. And you can see behind me, there's a sample of some of what that looks like. And basically, a kids' devotional is when you come alongside your child and you're going to do it with them, especially when they're in those kind of kindergarten, first, second, third grade years. When they get to be fourth and fifth grade, they'll have a little bit more autonomy on how to do that. And there's different, it kind of varies on age group as far as these kids' devotions. But we want you to be able to do those with your kids. And so when you pick up your child, you will get one based on the age or the grade that they're in. If you're not here on a Sunday because you are sick or on vacation, do you see that? Yeah. Then they're available online. And if you put that slide back up, we've got a direct link to it. It's riverridge.church/ridgekids. There's also a way to navigate to it on the website. But if you're not here on a Sunday and you want your kids to do it, then you'll just go to that website. And one of the things that we're going to do to elevate this, because we want to create a rhythm, you to create a rhythm with your kids, is if your kids are younger, kindergarten through third grade, we actually have little prizes we're going to start to give out. So if they bring one back, they'll get like a little fruit snack or a little ring or a Super Bowl ball or something like that. And then the older kids who are in fourth and fifth grade, they're going to do it together. So as a group, the more these that they bring back, when they reach a certain goal, then they'll get a pizza party or a donut party or something along those lines. So anyway, just really want to encourage you to do that. And I realize that we're giving kind of an external reward, and ideally, we want our kids just to do this for intrinsic value. Intrinsically, the internal reward, I want to do these God time cards because I get closer to God. And that will come over time, but it's sort of like speeding, right? How many of you drive under the speed limit for the intrinsic value of driving safely? Not very many of you, right? You drive under the speed limit because you don't want a $200 fine, right? It's the same type of thing that the external thing helps us a little bit in that. And then the other thing that we're going to do, I'm super excited about this. Whenever we have a fifth Sunday, we're going to do something which is called the Gospel Together. And so if you as a parent want to accompany your elementary age child to Ridge Kids for the first part of the service, we'll do a gospel presentation for you to hear sitting next to your child and just to hear that and discuss that. Or on the fifth Sunday, if you want, for the first half during the worship, you can come in and worship with your child. And then for the second half of all the fifth Sundays, the kids will be separated. We'll give you more information and details on that if you're a parent. So those are the 5 goals. Imagine the end, make it personal, fight for the heart, widen the circle, and create a rhythm. I think those goals are doable. Maybe as you're listening, you're like, gosh, that seems like a lot. If it feels like a lot, then pick 2 or pick 3 or 1. But here's the thing. And I know it's raining. It sounds really cool. But I really want you to give me your attention just for these last 30 seconds. I've been giving sermons here for 22 and a half years. And I know that not every sermon that I give, people apply. I know that people walk out of here and go, too hard. Not going to do it. It's raining. That's Satan trying to distract you, right? But here's the thing, is I know that not every sermon is put into practice. But I would say if you are a parent, this sermon is too important to walk out of here and say, not that big of a deal. Don't really think Matt's right on that. I got too much to do. Your kids are too valuable for you to say, not going to really apply this sermon. Just want to leave you with that. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, thank you for today. Thank you for just all that you've taught us. I pray that we would influence the next generation, even when we are old and gray, that we would proclaim your truth and your might to the next generation. I ask all this in Jesus' name.